Hey folks.
Hello.
Welcome back to Wandering to Wellness. Ian and Lydia as per usual. And today we have a very special guest with us, Dasha Maximov. Dasha's a management consultant. What on earth is she doing on our podcast, you might ask? Management consultancy is interesting. It's a fascinating thing, and obviously there's a lot of psychological tools that are used there that we're curious about. But actually Dasha, I bumped into in London a couple of weeks ago at a conference, and it turns out that she is reorientating her life towards biohacking and like beginning to look at her own, examining what she can do to improve her own health, and has done that in such a dive in 2 feet first sort of way. I was like, oh, we have to have you on. We have to have a chat. So yeah, so what, like, give us a little bit of a sense of where this year, because it's basically this year, where it all kind of started. Can you give us a bit of a sense of that?
Sure. So it really came to fruition with this year, I think. Health has always been, and wellness has been on the periphery, if you will.
Yeah.
But
like
this
with your
year,
parents kind of been
like with my parents,
okay,
yeah. My parents have always been really health oriented. We would go mushroom picking. I'm Russian by background, so we go mushroom picking when I was a kid, and hiking. I mean, it was always an active lifestyle, I suppose. But I think health-wise and taking control of my health was really this year.
Okay, right.
So, and it's maybe a little bit before as well. But this year I kind of I smacked.
Focus.
Yeah, I got smacked.
You did get smacked.
Literally did get smacked. Yeah. So I had my 6th concussion. So I'm not just clumsy. I am clumsy, but that's not the only reason. So my first one was when I was 18. There was a car accident, and then the subsequent 4, the 4 after, were all sports related. So mountain biking, kite surfing, wakeboarding, something else I can't remember now. And then this last one was
I can't remember.
Can't remember now. The last one was salsa dancing.
What? A salsa concussion?
Yeah, salsa concussion. Don't salsa dance. No.
Wear a helmet if you're going
Wear
to.
a helmet if you will, yeah. It was good. The guy was spinning me, and we bumped into another pair, and I fell backwards, and because he was spinning me so fast, instead of catching me underneath, I fell backwards, and my head hit the floor. On the back, the left occiput.
Scary.
Yeah.
And was that an immediate, were you knocked out?
I was out.
Okay,
I was completely out. So, and the thing is with concussions, right? Every single brain injury is different, and every brain injury is different. Sorry guys, if you couldn't hear me. Every brain injury is different.
Yeah.
Every single one that you have gets it's much worse as well. So even a small knock now could probably be a lot worse for me versus somebody else, because I'm just more sensitive to it.
And this is the thing with chronic traumatic encephalopathy, isn't it? That they're studying where it's actually the concussions you don't see that are actually possibly the more dangerous. It's that repeat nature. Like rugby is a huge thing over here. There's a big conversation happening around that. Obviously American football is huge in the States, and there's you see the violence of the interactions in American football that's enhanced by the fact that they're wearing so much padding. And in rugby, there's no padding at all.
There's nothing.
And guys are going there's this awful thing about because there's a lot of machismo around it, where guys are just stand up and I'm good to take that penalty. I'm good to and they just kind of stagger back in. And luckily in the last maybe 6 to 10 years, they've begun to kind of put in protocols, so they have to do even name test protocols to see if they can come back on. But that's not even really enough, because they're still getting they still have the knock. It doesn't matter whether they can remember their name or not.
People are saying that. So one, concussions are silent. So you don't see, if I break my wrist, you put it in a cast, you can see it, that's that, right? So people are aware of the fact that you've had an injury. A brain injury, you don't know. So you could be just fine, out socially, everything's great, and then the next day you're just spent, you're just emotionally drained, or you're feeling depressed, or you're feeling sad, or whatever it is, and you can't link the 2 and 2 together, because people say, oh well, yeah, I had a bump on, I fell on the ice and I fell backwards, but I'm fine, 2 days later. Well, it's actually 2 weeks later, a month later, there could be reverberating effects that you didn't really realize. And I think that the brain is also one of those things where you can't immobilize it. With a cast, you can immobilize it.
But it's just going to be shaking around.
Your brain, you wake up, you make a cup of tea, you're using your brain. You're right? Okay, fine, let's say you're not, reading, quantum physics, fine. like, yeah, then you're really using your brain, but your brain, you cannot immobilize it. So it's always going to take, so if anybody has had concussions, which they say that like 95% of people have had a concussion, they just don't know it, or they breeze it off. So if you've had one, know that it takes much longer to actually get over it than people really think. So kind of ease into it, I guess.
So I was like, I have a personal story in this as well, because I broke a windscreen of a 4-wheel drive with my head in a bike accident about 10 years ago, and then did the same again with the helmet second time around. No helmet the first time. And it was mad, because I was quite concerned, because this is, you know, a world that I live in terms of, you know, preventative healthcare. So it's something where this awareness of, you know, protecting the brain and how neuronal inflammation is that kind of longer term pattern that maybe goes undiagnosed until, you know, things are really wrong. And it was weird for me. I was given this kind of like clean bill of health and walked out of the hospital the next day just because there wasn't literally wasn't a mark. I hadn't even cut my head, and I'd smashed a windscreen with my head. And they were like, cool, you're fine. And I was like, I actually want to go back and see like a neurologist. I want to see a consultant. You know, but they were like, shh, you're fine. You're actually clean bill of health. You know, you got a sore knee. That's your problem. I was like, no, this thing, like that's what took the knock. So what did you get did you get any kind of follow up after your concussions? Was there a level of care, an ongoing thing, or what did they do?
So I think this is it. This was where I said enough. In that so immediately after, I woke up the next morning and I felt like the worst thing ever. I mean, it felt like I was hit by a truck, had a migraine, had, you know, my period, had a hangover, like you name it, you smash them all together, and that's what I felt like. And I was like, all right, well, fine, I'll go to A&E. I go there, and the lady says, you know, follow my finger, walk up and down, whatnot, you're fine. Okay, you're fine. Here is, and this is the part where I just got angry, where she said she takes like a pad where she had the same prescription, cut and paste, typed out, cut and paste. She cuts it out, gives me this little piece of paper, and it says 3 tablets of ibuprofen and 6 tablets of paracetamol. And that was my face. That was exactly my face. I was like, so I know that my brain is a little wonky right now, but 3 plus 6 is 9. 9 pills a day until when?
Until what?
Until what happens. She's like, oh, well, if you have pain, then what else are you going to do? Like, and thank you very much. Sayonara, goodbye. And so then I started really getting into saying, you know what, if this is a doctor, you know, and again, A&E, I have nothing, you know, I have the utmost respect for how we treat trauma.
They're triaging.
Right? And triaging, exactly. But that answer, I just said, enough, I need to see what are the other options. So basically this past year has been kind of my hacking my way back, I guess. So it's been, I think I've counted 15 doctors in 4 countries, testing and trying and everybody. And it's interesting because I think with health there is this idea of like a reductionist. You know, I'm going to just look at this one little piece, and that's my speciality, because that's what we've been forced to do. Right? You become a neurologist because that is your speciality, because the body is so incredibly difficult and it's complex, and so in order for us to even have a chance at understanding it, we have to become specialists. But therein lies the problem. If we're specialists, then we're going to miss...
We're isolating.
You're going to miss all the amazing connections that happen. You know, so I would see all these different doctors, and they'd say, yes, we've tested for this, it's not that. Okay, so if it's not that, move on to this. And so it's been interesting. I mean, it's interesting.
Were you having problems with your health that lasted? Neuronally, did those things persist?
So basically, the concussion happened in October, and up until, I would say, October of this year, so 12 months, I was having headaches constantly. So immediately after, so concussions, I think, are also, they say that most people will have symptoms for 90 days, and then after 90 days, that's considered already post-concussive symptoms or syndrome, and it can be a longer-term thing. So then there's a couple of folks that start saying it's no longer just a brain smack. It has now become a hormonal problem, and so some people start looking into the hormones and saying, okay, what are those things that you can be fixing there? But my symptoms, to go back to your question, one, I mean, full-on depression. I mean, to the extent that my dad would call me and like FaceTime, and he'd say, oh, well, like the weather looks a little cloudy, and I was in London, which is typical, and I would just break down because it would, for no reason. It wasn't an attack at me. It wasn't anything wrong at all. It was just like, yeah, it's so negative. It's like, what? So it's these like little triggers that would just get me going for no reason.
Yeah.
And then, so there'd be one day that I'd be fine and happy, and then the next day, again, just feeling depressed or just spent and like having no energy whatsoever, and no desire to see friends or have any sort of external inputs.
And do people really notice this outside of you, like people who've known you for a long time, and they're like, oh my God, who is this new Dasha? What's going on?
Yeah,
they did.
Yeah, okay. For sure.
And were you alive to it before they made you aware of it? Were you very conscious of it, or did it take an external person to go, Dasha, you need to, like, this thing is not...
Probably the latter, probably the latter. I mean, like, I knew it, I could feel it, but then when they started kind of double downing on it, or like saying, hey, what's up? Then I noticed it even more.
Okay.
But then the other things were headaches. So just I would wake up in the morning and I would have a headache. I would go to sleep at night and I'd have a headache. Now it wasn't like a migraine headache. It wasn't a what do they call it? A headache that's very focalized.
Sure.
I don't know. It's escaping my brain now.
Okay.
Anyway, it wasn't. It was just like a pressure, right? So it was just right on the left temple.
Yeah.
Just it felt like somebody was kind of squeezing my head in.
Interesting.
So it wasn't debilitating,
yeah.
but it was constant. And if you guys have ever lived with chronic, constant pain, you can understand how exhausting it is. And you're like, wait, is today going to be one of those days where I don't have a headache, or is today going to be like every other day?
Wow.
You know, and living day in and day out with that for 12 months, and then other doctors saying, oh, it's in your head, or we don't know what the answer is. That was just, this year has been, it's been a game of patience, which I needed, and a game of humility. Because I think that sometimes we need that smack, and to say, wait, it can all be taken away very quickly. Like, be grateful for what you have. Because I think before I was just kind of flying, you know, and going 300 miles an hour. I still go that, maybe 100 miles an hour now. But not taking a moment to pause and just say, holy moly, look at this. I mean, you and I met on a whim, and now we're both in Dublin sitting and having an amazing conversation. Like, what is going on? It's incredible, you know?
The connections, the potential for connections are amazing when you wake yourself up to them, especially when you open yourself up to them. So, can you...
One other thing. Sorry, guys. The other symptom was light sensitivity.
Wow. Okay, so that just came on.
So basically it was like my symptoms were headaches, that depression, the loss of memory for sure, and then light sensitivity. So the loss of memory, that was a big one, because at the time that I was doing, that I had the concussion, I was doing a master's in neuroscience. So it was a little ironic that I had a massive, brain injury while I'm studying the brain. And so I would, for me, I would read these scientific journals, feel like I'm doing great, have my notes, everything's like good to go. Next morning I wake up,
actually gone. You're showing me that bad.
Actually gone. Like I knew the outline, right? I knew the macro of the paper. But the details of which immunochemistry they did, or like what tests, or what are they controlled for, anything like that, no clue. I'd have to like look back at my notes and like, this is ridiculous.
Damn.
So memory was a big one that I've been hacking this year. And then light sensitivity. So then I started getting really interested in light, because with concussions, people say for the first week, stay off devices, right? You don't want that flicker from the computer.
That's interesting.
You don't want, like, if you don't want to look at a screen, you don't want to, just stay away from computers.
And what is that? Do they know what that does? What that flicker does?
It's too much for your brain.
It's too stimulating.
Yeah, it's too
many images for...
Yeah. It's like, again, going back to the metaphor of the cast, right? So if you broke your wrist, right? And if you just had somebody like pulsing you like that, there's no way that your wrist is going to heal, right? So it's the same idea.
Okay.
And in general, it's the energy that's coming from, I mean, light, as we know, light can harm and it can heal, right? So a sunburn is a perfect example of light harming. So therefore, if it can harm, it can also heal. It has the energy to heal. So that being said, from light coming from a screen, it's harming you. So I got really interested in light as well. So one of the healing elements that I found, which not many people talk about nowadays, is, and it used to be like a huge thing, is heliotherapy. So Helios in Greek is sun, right? So back before vaccines were invented, they had solariums, or like solariums, a sun hospital, I guess. And they would have it in the Alps. They had it in Russia. They had them, which you wouldn't think about Russia and sun, but yes. But they had them in like high altitudes. And so then they would bring people in, and if they had some issue, then they would like narrow in the sunbeams into that part of their body.
I've always heard like the Latin and Roman physicians dispatching people off up to the Alps for their like sun and walks and clear air and that sort of stuff. But actually they were doing that much with that.
Absolutely,
That's amazing.
It's like Google it, it's incredible. It's early infrared, that's exactly it.
It's phenomenal.
And so they used to do that before vaccines became a thing. And when they did, then all of a sudden they're like, forget it, vaccine is the way to go, which it is in certain cases. But it's interesting that we have lost the idea of heliotherapy and the sun as a healer. So one of the things, as kind of hacking myself back, I kind of left civilization, if you will, for 3 months. And I said, I'm going to go back to nature and see how nature can heal me. So I was without like almost no Wi-Fi. I mean a little bit, but staying away from computers to the extent possible. I was without like the lights. I completely changed at home, and then in the mornings I would wake up with the sun and stare at the sun. And so this is one of those things where even in India it's a practice that people do, from way back when. And people nowadays are like, what, are you crazy? You're going to burn your retina and la la la. No. So the first hour, it's the first hour of the sun. So you have to wake up early. You can't just do it in the middle of, middle of the day, because then you will burn your retina, so don't do that. The first hour of the sun, there's no UVB. I think it's UVB. Don't quote me on that, but there's no UVA maybe. Maybe it's UVA. So there's nothing that's going to burn your retina. So for the first hour, you can do it. Now, granted, you're not going to. I mean, when you first start training your eye to it, your eyes going to water, and it's going to be slightly painful. So you gradually get there.
That's really interesting.
Right?
Okay.
So like first,
a bit like the response to the cold, where it's like, this isn't actually pleasant. It's uncomfortable.
Yes.
Wow, fascinating.
Exactly. So the first couple of days, like 10 seconds, and 20, then 30, and so I got to the point where I was basically watching it for like 30 minutes. And it's also incredible if you can start doing that as a practice. Now maybe in Ireland it's a little bit difficult because,
that is the problem.
We don't get every day as there's been the sunrise, but there's been some goodies. It's been a good year for
the sun. I mean, in the summer times it's good.
Oh, for sure.
It's just that there can't be cloud coverage.
There can be cloud, But I think for me it's also what I've noticed is light. I've gotten so interested in light as a healer and as a top up, if you will. So everybody talks about vitamin D, but we're all closed up, So to the extent that I think that we can start shifting our minds to thinking about light, proper sunlight, not this stuff, but proper natural sunlight, as if it's like a petrol station, and saying, okay, I need to top up. So during the day, all right, go for a walk with your coworker. Go get out and just, again, maybe it's cold, but even giving a little bit of sun exposure, sitting, like being outside and just, taking a little bit of that in, get that top up. It's not that difficult.
Isn't it really interesting when you look culturally at parts of the world where they're told to really cover up?
Yeah.
I mean, like some of it where there's very strong sunlight, but I'm sure there's some interesting studies to be done there on vitamin D synthesis and those sorts of things. And I wonder I'd love to know, genetically how those cultures have adapted to that aspect without having any sun exposure. I mean,
that's true.
I don't know. Anyway,
or maybe it bleeds to the clothes now. I
wonder. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know. Anyway, curious. But so you had 3 months of a real digital detox essentially, and a full kind of back to nature program. And then was that when you went to India, or when was that?
No. So
you just do a lot at once, basically, don't you? You're doing immunology and you're working management consulting. What?
Yeah. So management consulting I stopped. When I went to go do my master's in neuroscience.
Okay.
So I am no longer a management consultant. But that was my previous life, I suppose. So I shifted to get my master's in neuroscience because to me the brain is one of these things that we don't know anything about, and kind of like what we were saying before. many of us remember a smell, right, from our childhood, but we have no idea what we ate 3 days ago. And so to me, the brain is one of those things that's so fascinating, and it's going to, my entire lifetime, it's going to be something that we're going to be working towards and working on. So that's why I went to get my master's in neuroscience, because I thought it was really intriguing. But India was now 5 years ago, when I was a management consultant. So at that point, I got completely burnt out. So if anybody is kind of listening who's, either in a high stress job or kind of finance or consulting or anything like that, I was in that world. So I, and it's a tough world from a health perspective, because you're in the office by 7 or 8, maybe here in Europe it's a little bit later, but you're on, right? You're completely go, and especially if you're traveling, you've gone to the client site on Monday morning, you're there, you're living in a hotel, you're with your team, you're always like, your adrenaline is just through the roof all the time, like you're never off. And then you're going to restaurants, which are incredible, but you're probably drinking at night. You have these uppers and downers, which is, caffeine to get you up, and then at night just, have some alcohol to put you to sleep. And it's this vicious lifestyle, but it's an amazing one. Like I learned so much in the 9 years that I was there. But from a health perspective, it's just tough. So I got burnt out, and at that point I said, can I take a sabbatical? And that's when I went to India. And so then I got interested in yoga from not the asana perspective, but more from the mindset. Again, always going back, thinking about the health as a periphery and my interest in the brain. So it feels like I've always had this journey of like circling back to it.
Isn't it interesting? When you reflect on it, like how much your life, like the accidental or incidental things that have like steered you towards this thing. I mean, it's amazing because you obviously have such a passion for it. It's kind of chicken and egg, like which came first, did the passion or the act or the incidents that drove you towards that thing? It's amazing. And so when you started looking at, you're saying yoga, like non-asana based yoga or less asana focused yoga, did you have a meditative practice before this? Was this like your first? Was it totally new? Were it fresh eyes?
I had dabbled in meditation. I think I was like coming off a breakup or something, and like, we always
used it
we always
come,
but I didn't get it. I was like, all right, well, I'm sitting, like what is this, but it was intriguing enough. I had probably had like some experience, maybe I'm guesstimating, I guess, where I saw something or like it worked for something or it calmed me down, or for some reason I got more interested in it such that I wanted to read and learn more about it.
And tell me, how did you find out? Because I think here, like a common thing now is that people, when they think about yoga, they just think about asana. They don't have an understanding of yoga as a philosophy and a way of life. And then the asana is like one of those 8 limbs and not all of the 8 limbs. How it's very rare for people, I find, to actually know that is a thing. How did you find that if you weren't kind of heavily into that yoga scene?
I think either one of two things, I don't remember, but either one, friends who are Indian who probably had said something like in passing, like, oh, asana, blah, 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 and they probably said something, and I was like, oh, what is pranayama, right? There's a breathing practice. Oh, okay, wait, and then there's dharana and dhyana, like what are the other things? So it's either from a friend, or I think that I probably had a yoga teacher that had mentioned something about it, and so then it just piqued my interest, and then books started and all that. And I feel like once you have that door like squeaked open, that little thing, like the light that comes through, then all of a sudden you're like, wait, hold up, what's that? I need to learn more about it. But I can't remember, honestly. But yeah, I think in meditation, to your question of like, had I really done it before? No. And I'm a very like black and white person. I'm trying to shift that a little bit. But so for me, it was like, all right, 2 feet in, like let's go. And so my friend had told me about vipasana, like 3 years before I had even thought about it. It was like 10 days of silent meditation, like. That sounds like jail. Like
you're probably a bit pitted for that, I think.
Yeah, I'm definitely pitted for sure. I was like, why would I choose to not talk for 10 days? What? Clearly I can speak a lot. But somehow some people say that Vipassana, it kind of finds you, and so when I was in India, it so happened that another friend had said it again, and this time I was more open to it. And I think that vipassana, so for those who, have you guys talked about vipassana?
No, we haven't.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, basically what they say is meditation. There are so many different types of meditation. There are different schools and all that. But what they say is the meditation that Buddha had used to get to his version of it, or his enlightenment, was the version of vipassana. And the reason is because when he was traveling around and he kind of passed this tradition down within India. Problem is that within India there was warfare and strife and all that, so it kind of got diluted. Versus in Burma and Myanmar, it was still pure because it's the country is kind of remote and there wasn't all that kind of fiefdoms and fighting, so it stayed pure. So there was this guy who was a businessman. His name was Goenka, and he follows a very similar story as Buddha did, in that I think it was in the 1960s. Don't quote me on the date, but it was like fairly recent, like 1960s, 1970s. He was a really very successful businessman in Burma, and then so he had businesses left, right, and center, like all the wantings of life he had, and he started having headaches and pain, and he's like going to all these doctors. He's like, what do I do? Nobody could help him. Then all of a sudden his one friend said, well, go to this guy, he'll heal you. He'll heal you from your pain. So he goes to this guy, and the guy's like, well, all right, do you want your pain gone? He's like, yeah, I want my headaches gone. I said, no. Do you want me to help you get rid of your pain? Well, yeah, I do. Yes. Turns out that then the Goenka stayed with this man, an apprentice with him. And again, because of the lineage of from Buddha down in this meditation form in Burma, it hasn't been broken. Goenka, this businessman, just in the past 40 years or so, learned this form of meditation, studied it, and then in about the 1990s, he said, you know what, I need to go out and give this to the world. So he opened up all these different centers around the world, and literally, I'm sure there are some in Ireland. Like
you can go to Dojimbera down the Beara Peninsula, which is a beautiful Buddhist retreat. I know a couple of people who've done Vipassana down there. There's a few places I think right now.
Yeah. So you guys can do it. But so the idea there is that it's a center that's free, and you don't pay anything to be there. You are there to learn. And you are there to get the teachings. And so these teachings, Goenka had taken it from like 5 months down to 3 months, down to 2 months, down to 1 month, down to 10 days. And he whittled it down to say, okay, this is the minimum amount of time that I need you to focus with me for 10 days, such that I can teach you how to meditate as Buddha meditated. And it's called the Vipassana method. And so you basically go for 10 days, and it's completely silent, and you don't pay for anything. But then afterwards, they say if you got something out of the teaching, then you pay it forward for the next person.
Okay. Oh wow.
So I just absolutely love it, because you have centers around the world, and so the one that I went to is in Bombay, and so I get there completely free. Listen, it's nothing like extravagant. It's not, it's basic sattvic food.
That's what you want.
Yeah, that's what you want.
Process.
Yeah. And you go there, and they ask, I like to journal. So they're like, give all your journals in, give your headphones and your, I like any musical devices, your books. You don't want anything when you're there for 10 days.
Okay.
And the idea is because all of those things are inputs, right? So either you're reading or you're listening or you're this or you're this. But it's like, we have enough in there already from, the 30, 40 years that we've been on this planet. Like, you have enough in there, you don't need more inputs. So for 10 days you just sit, and they teach you, they walk you through this method. So you have a mixture of kind of big settings where everybody has their own space, their own pillow, and then you can go back to your room and have time on your own. So you're effectively meditating for 10 hours out of the day.
And so did you, what struggles came up for you in that? Everything probably, but go on.
Come on.
Yeah, what were there things that presented themselves that you were totally unawares of? Was most of the things that kind of reveal themselves things that you knew you kind of had to face and you'd been kind of ignoring, or
all of the above?
Okay,
yeah.
Right.
I mean, so I'm a person that's also that if I decide on something, I'm going to do it.
Okay.
So there was about 100 people that were there. I think 68 of them finished it, and then the other 32 they were like, enough, we can't deal with it.
Interesting.
So it's the 3 days. The first 3 days are usually the toughest. It's tough because you're just learning how to sit with the aches, right? Because if you're sitting for 10 hours, it's like, oh, my knee, my back, my this. Like all of a sudden you realize you're human, you know. And I mean, I guess we all realize we're human, but and then around the fourth day, people really break. Because that's and they break in a good way usually, but you'll have I mean, demons come up, you know, you have like your dreams. I mean, you have things come up that like I had a family member basically die in a dream, a family member that's absolutely close to me, and I was petrified that it actually could be a reality.
Wow.
But then you sit back and you say, wait, again, if that is the case, and over the course of these 10 days, if God forbid something like that happened, then what can I do?
Yeah.
Right? It's like, well, I can either stress about it, or I cannot. Like, it is, you know, to say a phrase which says a lot but doesn't say anything at the same time. It is what it is.
Yeah.
You can't do anything about it. But
and all you can do is sit there and give your love to that person who you're already close to. Fine if they exist, and if they've passed on and they haven't, doesn't matter.
I mean, there's a lot of reflection. You look back on, for me at least, there was a lot of looking back on my relationships. With my family, with my loved ones, with how I am as well.
Okay.
So for me, it was I've been described as an onion, where it takes a lot to like open up all the different shells. And you know, is that the right way to be? And I don't know what the answer is still. I pride myself on not being crazy open with everybody, because if everybody's important, then nobody's important to some extent, you know. So it's like an interesting dialogue of, are you equally open with everybody, or do you have your close knit of like 3-4 people or whatever it is, your family, that you can really lean on and say, you know. So I don't know what the right answer is.
It's a bit about finding your tribe a little bit, isn't it? I mean, like, you're obviously not choosing your family. And they're going to accept you if you decide that you're going to suddenly start oversharing, whatever they call it, or whatever, you know. But it's a bit different, I think, when it comes to your social circle. You probably find that evolves, or did that evolve after? It's
evolving now.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
It's evolving now, yeah. So kind of with now, I think I'm getting much more into being not strict, but being assertive with what I am okay with from a health perspective, right? Okay. And being able to say, no, this is important to me, and it's not that I'm trying to be elitist or bourgeoisie or, you know, whatever. It's just like I feel like I'm informed about certain things, and God forbid I know nothing in the grand scheme of things, especially in this health world. Once you start like learning a little bit, then you realize you know this much and you have much more to learn. But I think that I'm becoming now more assertive to say this is important, and so then my social circles are also becoming like that, because whereas before I would say, oh, okay, well, no, it's not that important to have a vacation where we're exploring nature or where we're moving, you know. Now that's not a vacation if you don't. And so I find that I'm even not, it's almost like I'm not interested in going on to the benders or the, you know, like the vacations where before I probably would have tagged along just to be polite. Now it's like, no, what gives me joy?
What do I want to opt into?
I mean, if I, like, this year, because of this concussion, and like, if your memory is wiped and your personality somehow gets wiped as well, you start thinking, well, I mean, there is a finite amount of time on this planet, and if there is a finite amount of time, then I might as well make the most of absolutely everything. And so if I really don't want to do it, if it's not going to bring me joy, whatever that experience is, then okay, being polite to everybody else versus that experience, you know, versus before, this was always number one, being polite. Now I think this other element of it's a finite life, and what's going to be the best choice. And sometimes it's this still, but at least this now is
It's in the equation.
has a play. Yeah, there's a play on it.
And how did you
Yeah.
find people responded to that? Because when I started making those choices, and I was quite young, I was like 18 when I started doing that, there was a really noticeable shift. You know, people weren't that happy about that change.
I mean, I'm not on this planet to change everyone, but I think that what I found is people get excited by your own infection. You know, like you're infectious, like, hey, listen, like, so I have a friend right now, we're here in Dublin, and I told him we're going cold water swimming. He's like, you're mental. But we did it yesterday, and it was, I mean, we're going to remember that for the rest of our lives. You know, and he easily could have said, no, go on your own. And that would have been fine as well. But I think because once people start seeing the benefits of how excited you are about something, or you're able, even when you're able to explain why it's good, right? So something like, I don't know, what's a good example? Like saying on a vacation with a bunch of people, let's say, let's go hike this thing, right? It becomes, you know, maybe certain people really don't want to hike because they're out of shape, or they don't feel like it, or it's just not their thing. Well, then it can become a dialogue of like, all right, well, I have no interest in going to see the malls and the touristy things. Just don't care. And you have no interest in going hiking. So why don't half a day we do what you want to do and half a day we do what I want to do? And we can do a compromise. Because I don't necessarily think it has to be like my way or the highway, but it's introducing these little nuggets into people's lives. And so they also, if they're open to it, then I think people gravitate towards it. If somebody is just completely closed to it, then I think what I've noticed is I have started compartmentalizing those individuals and just saying, okay, I'm not going to give you all of myself anymore. And that's not bad. It's just energy is important. And if you're, not you, sorry, but like if that person is, for lack of a better word, an energy vampire, or just not on my kind of wavelength, I guess, for lack of, like, not that one's better than the other, but we're just on different wavelengths, then that's still fine. It's just taking that moment to just say, okay, we will not meet in the middle.
Yeah, you're not serving each other.
And we're not serving each other.
But
and
also
perhaps
that you have to safeguard your own energy.
And we have to safeguard it, yeah. So if it's like, if it's somebody that I have to meet for whatever reason, or they have to stay in my life for whatever reason, that's fine. But just like bookending them and just saying, okay, you're not going to take this much of my energy and my life and my everything, right? You're going to take an hour of my coffee, you know, and then that's that. And you know, but I don't know, for me, I've more or less found that everybody, most people will say I'm crazy. Let's say this cold water swimming, right? So we went to Greystones and swam with the Happy Pair guys, which if anybody wants to do it, highly recommend it.
Yeah,
awesome.
Absolutely.
They're just awesome. But I mean, but like I found that anytime the people start gravitating towards it, and it's just, and it becomes a I'm scared to do it. And so you start having a different conversation, which is much more open of like, all right, you don't want to do cold water swimming. Why? Well, it's not like, oh, no, I can't do that. Well, why can't you do that? You know, and I feel like once you start having that as the crux of the conversation, it's just different. It's like, and then you can start chipping away at that person as well, to say, okay, well, yeah, you're not going to come and swim in the frozen sea in December, fine, but do you know why I take cold showers in the morning, right? And I find that the second that, for me at least, once I know what the why is, right, of why I'm doing something, then the how becomes a lot easier.
Oh my God, so much easier.
Right?
Yeah. Well, because like things like wheatgrass suddenly are tasty.
Yeah. Like a turmeric latte. When I first heard about it, I was like, wow, like putting a spice.
Leave it out.
Come on.
Yeah.
But now it's like, oh wait, I know why I'm doing it, and then my taste buds have shifted.
Absolutely. Isn't it weird how that happens, isn't it? It's like there's a real will aspect to that.
Yeah.
It's funny how your body has these moments where, you know, you have to listen to when there's like good intuitions that your body wants to have, whatever. a square of chocolate or a bar of chocolate.
Yeah.
And then there's, you know, and sometimes there's positivity in that. Like you hear a lot of people refer to, particularly with women wanting chocolates, like it's magnesium or it's the theobromine or those sorts of things. Yeah. And then there's also wants to, like, you know, be away from people. Maybe you want to be away from people for much longer than you probably should. And you have to, like, it's difficult to intuit those things. And I think probably what you're doing in terms of sitting is beginning to, like, understand that. And one of the dangers, I think, with the biohacking world that you're in, very much in, you seem to have dived into, is that it's a lot about external references. It's a lot about, like, okay, what's your heart rate variability today? You know, what's your what was your sleep like last night? What's your BPM? What's your IGF-1? What's all these sorts of things, external tests, as opposed to kind of like sitting with what's internal. And I think one of the things we mentioned off camera was that, like, a lot of that, and it feels to me as well, it feels very male. It feels like a very masculine thing, that kind of like
even just
analysis.
the way of doing it.
Yeah, the approach to it, very much so. Maybe not the outcome, but the approach.
Yeah. It's linear.
It's really linear, isn't it?
Yeah, so
exactly.
It's a really easy thing to understand from A to B to C. And I think, you know, as women, we kind of tend to be a more like whole picture thing, isn't it? That study, you know, people go into the room and what do you recognize? And the guys go straight for one small area and focus in and really remember the stuff really well from one area, and women remember a less amount from a larger area.
Yes, really interesting,
and that's kind of it, isn't it? When we're looking at health, we tend to kind of go softly, and guys tend to.
There was an article written 4 years ago, I think. I just posted it. So we have a Facebook group for women biohackers, and to your point, the term biohacking is great for what it is, which is hacking your own biology. It makes sense. It's cool. It's an idea. It's catchy. It's got the idea of like an N of one, like a statistics of one, rather than these grand, large studies where you have thousands of people, which also have a place. Like everything has a place, right? It's just so like I personally like the idea of biohacking and saying, I know like something will work for me, but it's not going to work for you, and then moreover, it's extra not going to work for you because you're a male, right? So I like the idea of like taking control. So for me, what I love about it is taking control of my own health, right? Which I think we've currently outsourced our health towards doctors and like laying the blame on them to some extent. I mean, like, okay, well, I go to the doctor, he tells me to take a pill, and if it doesn't work, then it's his fault. It's like, well, why don't we actually start doing things ahead of time before even having to get to the doctor, you know?
And this is preventative healthcare.
Preventative, it's the world that anybody who's listening to this is kind of in it already.
Well, kind of. We're hoping to introduce some people. It's horrible just to think this might be just totally inside of all, isn't it? Right.
You're not all inside of it all.
Yeah, please don't.
So, but yeah, like the idea of wellness, and like preventative healthcare, and it being, everybody says, oh, it's much more expensive. Well, probably not if you start doing it early enough, like your boy, right? Like if he starts, you're going to be teaching him about this kind of thing, so that hopefully he's going to be so informed that, you know, there was somebody who was telling me the other day, the quote, the future doctor is the patient, right? So maybe he'll be his own doctor to some extent, you know?
Yeah, for me it was like, I made a huge investment last year. Basically, I called it my health insurance. I don't have health insurance, but my health insurance policy, I bought an infrared sauna last year.
Yeah.
And it's been, you know, it's the first time I've really kind of like showed up for myself financially to go, this is this important to me that I'm going to make sure that this is actually something that I can access all the time. And it's not something where I'm going to go to a spa or something like that to like. And it was interesting because I don't think I used the term kind of health insurance in the same way as other people do. And in Ireland there's a big focus on that. Like I don't know if in the world you're in, but there's a huge thing of like, particularly once you get past a certain age, suddenly it changes, the price changes. I've missed the boat on getting the discount health insurance for the rest of my life because I didn't get it early enough. Yeah, they discounted if you start like below the age of 33 or 34. But for me, I really felt like it's taking a stand such that I'm not going to, in future, I may end up regretting this, but that my insurance policies are my practices, as opposed to putting money into somebody else's account and then them paying for what happens down the tracks.
Absolutely.
And so, sorry, to come back to the female aspect of biohacking. So, like when you're like looking at that, what do you see as the difference in approach, and how do you practically approach biohacking in a different way? I wish we could leave the word biohacking behind, because I feel like that's maybe a problematic word even when it comes to it, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think so. First, to tackle that, biohacking I think is a great word. I think it's too niche. And so one of the things that we've been kind of starting to communicate and we feel that people have started to resonate with is the idea of optimizing your health. Because your version of an optimal health versus mine is very different, but equally we need to achieve it, or that's the intent, to achieve it. So the idea, instead of biohacking, the idea of health optimization. So for me, I think that term is a little bit broader. It can have biohacking as an element of it if you're really data driven, versus it can also have the more natural things of saying, taking cold showers. That is not necessarily biohacking, in that you can't, you're not going to have data behind it. Perhaps. It's not a marker. Maybe inflammation. But it's not like sleep tracking, which is very easy and obvious. Anywho, with women and women biohackers, we've called the Facebook group. So if anybody wants to join, it is a Facebook group. We've called it Women's Biohackers for now, because I think there is that. It's a good term for now.
Yeah,
right?
It's useful because it encapsulates what you're actually doing, I suppose, and it's a word that people are familiar with.
And it's a way for people to find it.
And it's a way for people to find it. But I think that we will, ultimately it'll be kind of health optimization, and maybe even in the future, that'll be health, period, We'll see how that goes. So I think we're just starting to delve into these types of things. But even the conversation on fasting, right? So we have like all the big influencers, again, are males, and they're wonderful, but we don't. Apart from Rhonda Patrick,
basically.
which awesome Rhonda Patrick. If you've never heard of her, she's incredible. She does wonderful things. But we have few and far between women. There are a couple out there who focus on hormones, who focus on gut, who focus on sexual health.
Yeah, so maybe list some of those. Sarah Gottfried is a goodie.
Sarah Gottfried is a goodie. Jolene, oh gosh.
Should be nice. We'll put
post them afterwards. Sorry, brain's not there. So I think for us, it's opening the conversation, because it's an intimate one with women, I think, and one that we've shunted to the side, because it's very easy, I think, in today's society to say, oh, well, we're not going to talk about that because it's seen as almost like too feminist, and then it's shoved into that realm, where it's like, wait, no, let's talk about hormonal health, which impacts our sexual health, which impacts our gut microbiome, which impacts how we show up to work, which impacts our whole entire, and how we operate as mothers and sisters and daughters. It shows up everywhere, right? But I think that the second that we start talking about like periods and menstruation, it becomes like kind of cringeworthy, and people just like they don't want to talk about that. But it's almost like that is almost a crux for women that for lack of a better word, bleeds into everything else.
And it's one of the defining distances, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like if you're looking at the differences between male and female, one of the
pun intended
is that. And I think I work a lot in corporate settings in wellness or yoga kind of world, and I'm always referencing in my classes all the time, like if you're on the first to third day of your period, then this asana is not appropriate, and this is what's happening physiologically in your body for why it's not appropriate. It's not just that, like, yes, you're bleeding, but it's like what's happening in your core muscles when you're bleeding, what's happening in your hormones, what's happening in your digestive system, what's happening in your elimination processes, how is it affecting all those things. And not just like on an asana level, obviously there are things that are not so suitable to do, but really, I think in a corporate setting often women don't want to talk about like, oh, I need to take this day for my period, or I'm not feeling like I'm at my optimal because my period, because they feel like it's an area where we're lacking, like it's showing a weakness.
It's seen as a weakness,
right? And I just think that it's when you come back to that why again, which we were talking about. If you know that there are certain foods that you can be eating that are nourishing around that time, there are certain practices that you can do that are nourishing. That's about how can you optimize your health then. It's not about how can you look at it from a place of lack or weakness. It's going, if I know these things, I just make these simple changes and I'm going to perform at my best. That's no different than going, I also know if I get up and I go for a run, I'm going to perform at my best. It's just knowing your body and understanding where you're at any particular time and optimizing your health for that. Like in China, for example, traditionally the dads would have made nourishing broths that would have been blood strengthening broths on the first couple of days of the women in the house's periods, and the women would have been given time off from work on the first couple of days. Even back in the times where everyone was forced to work in a really socialist way and everyone was in the factories, women still were given the first couple of days off of their period because they knew that then they would be better workers in the rest of the month. So it was practical. It was like, how can we get the most out of our workers? This is how we get the most out. And somehow in that time we've lost that.
Yeah. And I think we've even gotten to the point where we're saying, okay, I want to be completely, on point for the entire month. But it's like, well, actually, could it be that for 2 weeks out of the month, let's say, you're really focused and like able to do things like have that right side of the brain, right? Versus the other side, or left side, sorry. Versus the other 2 weeks, you can be more creative and saying, okay, well, if you're in a job where you can have both sides of those things, or you need to have both sides of those, can you schedule meetings such that the more strategic meetings are closer to your period, or versus the more like nitty gritty kind of detail oriented is on the other side of the month, and it's maybe the idea is, rather than trying to be like our male counterparts who are blessed to some extent of being able to kind of constantly be on, right? Maybe we have another strength that we've forgotten about, and pulling away from hacking and saying, okay, I have to always be on, to saying there is strength in pulling back and having that creative time of the month where things end up fitting together in ways that puzzle before didn't make any sense.
I think it comes back down to seasons as well, isn't it? We can't always be winter. No. We can't always have summer. No. There's these periods of fallow and periods of rest and periods of internalization, and then there's periods of action and blooming and sprouting and all of this kind of stuff. And when we look at that, it's not that we only could have summer and that would be the best way. We know that we need all the different ones, and that's the same with our cycle. There's those periods in our cycle that are our rest periods. There are periods where we can be all things to all people at all times, and then there are the periods of growth when we're creating new projects maybe. And once you know that and you understand why, it's again changing that mindset, isn't it? It's just going, okay, well, this is just practical. It just makes sense. It's not about being airy-fairy. It's just this is what makes sense for productivity if you're looking at it from a company point of view. And it makes sense for you longevity-wise. How are you going to have the best health for the longest amount of time in your life? And that is going to make you more productive.
Exactly. And I think it's also finding, to what you were saying before, the right foods, the right supplements, the right things by the month, like in those times of the month. Like, if you really think about it, that article that I was saying like 5-6 years ago, somebody wrote it, I put it on my Instagram a couple of weeks ago, where it really hasn't changed, this idea of biohacking. And like before, even again 4 or 5 years ago, there was still this mentality of it was very masculine heavy, and it hasn't changed. So why are we not doing something about it? Why aren't we saying there are foods, women have notoriously been biohacking for centuries, because we know what works and what doesn't work. For some reason, when you're pregnant, you really want pickles. That's a biohack, because your body is saying, or whatever, it's not health optimization. Your body is saying, I need that. I'm missing something. We just have never labeled it, So women are the original biohackers, actually. No.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, you were thinking about things internally and intuiting things, and I think it's really unhelpful that this world is so male dominated when you refer to biohacking. I think we're missing a voice there. I'm really interested to see where you take this, because clearly there's you have a really unique kind of set of kind of historical and life kind of path kind of things, and then your training obviously within neuroscience is, I think, because that's a very kind of reductive thing as well, right? But it'd be really interesting to see how you marry those two. I'm fascinated to see where you go with it.
It's an exciting. I think it's exciting also just to see the different cultural things as well. So from a female standpoint as well as just from a health standpoint, and how we're marrying these two things together. So for example, in Russia, we for ages have been eating buckwheat, and now it's becoming this cool thing, and it's like we're almost going back to nature, going back to the things that really have worked. We're creating. We were talking earlier about what does it really mean to be healthy in this day and age? And a lot of the things, like the products that are coming out, and they're all focused around making ourselves, simulating like a natural world in an unnatural environment, right? So we're changing the lights, we're having, lights that we can wake up to that are really, eye-opening and blue, kind of have that blue light. We have infrared, which before it was a fireplace. We have cold water showers and cryotherapy, which is amazing, but you can just take a cold shower. We have grounding mats. We'll just go outside in the bare feet and go ground. What's fascinating to me within this whole entire journey is how people are saying, oh, well, you need a lot of money for this, or you need, or it's really difficult, and health is really difficult. And I think that the goal of what we're working on now is to say that that's not the case. It's just to say that right now we're not aware of it, right? And I think what I love about what you guys are doing is you're bringing this awareness to people where the conversation hasn't been had. So it's kudos to you guys, because that's absolutely incredible. But I think that's the way that things will change. Because before, if you think doctor, and the word I think it was docere, was to teach. So a doctor was a teacher, right? And I think that in certain realms of the world that is still the case, in others not so much. So it's on us to teach ourselves if we're not getting that, and if the system is kind of saying that you only see a doctor for 15 minutes. That's not enough, right? So it's up to us to listen to the podcast, to have these conversations, to learn from each other, and so for me also this year has been a lot about community. And podcasts are wonderful, but I get so much out of these conversations, and little tips and tricks. I'm like, oh, you should try, this, that, the other, which before I would never even thought of.
Okay, so that's actually where I want to finish off. So
sure.
Can you give us like a top 5 things that you've been using that are good for you? Not saying they're going to be good for everybody, but like things, obviously, I mean, I can hear 2 things that are going to be there already, but like things maybe that you've been using supplement wise, or dietary change that you've made that you've seen real change, or things you've really found that have improved your mental state, or those sorts of things. Can you give us like maybe 5 practices / supplements / foods that might be good for people to like dig into?
Yeah, sure. Like 5, yeah. Ooh, 5.
I think
5. All right. So brain.
No hanging fruit.
Yeah, brain. Let's do that one. So I was vegetarian for 9 years. Have shifted to eating fish. Hello. So fish. So omega-3s, you've got to have it.
Yes.
There's an amazing book called When Brains Collide. It's a guy who just walks you through why omega-3 is necessary for the brain. Read it. Have fish oil, have krill oil. Cannot put that out there enough. If you even think you've had a concussion at any point in life, double down on it. That's 1. 2 for the brain is lion's mane.
Yes.
As a supplement, I put it in my tea every morning. It's a mushroom. It's natural. It looks like a lion's mane, which is why it's called lion's mane. And you can just get it as a powder. And for me, it just feels. My brain just feels focused. It feels like I gave it. It just feels focused and ready to go. So it's. I gave it to my aunt, and she said that she felt like it was like Ritalin, like ADD, like for ADD, but it's natural, right? And it's neurogenerative, so it helps to bring back those connections and forge those connections.
I suppose the most exciting thing about neuroscience is that in the last 15-20 years they've discovered your brain cells don't just die, they do regrow. This BDNF thing, there's like all this potential for us to actually, we're not just crumbling, desiccating things. We can actually improve no matter what stage of life we are at, that we decide to make a change. Your body can say, okay, cool, I'm going to listen to you, I'm going to work with you, which is nice.
It's you can completely rechange your life with diet, with light, water, and magnetism, which is actually more important than diet in my opinion. With learning your circadian rhythms, there's so many different things, but in a nutshell,
that whole shift kind of changed because I remember like back in the day people were all on this like live fast, die young thing because
YOLO.
Sure, like what's happening, you're just getting older, you get to a certain point, everything's just going to go downhill, and so everyone was just like, okay, smoke as much as you want, drink as much as you want, go out party all the time. don't think about your health because sure, it's just going to be ruined. And then once this discovery happened and it came into mainstream media, like, oh, hang on, no, actually we can change this stuff, we can get stuff optimized, we can actually be better than we were before, we can improve. Then that changes your whole mindset, because that live fast, die young thing, it's suddenly like, oh no, hang on, that doesn't make so much sense.
Like and I think we're seeing it with our parents, right? Like half of my friends are like, wait, I don't want to be like that, you know, in 30 years time. Like I can, and then you see people who are your parents' age, who are, I mean, they look better than you do, you know, and you're like, wait, they're doing something right, you know. I saw a guy who was kite surfing and he was like 75 years old. Like, come on, I want to do that, you know. And it's, if I'm going to be on this planet for, let's say, 80 years, and who knows, maybe with longevity and, you know, all these advances with aging, it's going to be 120. I don't know, but let's say it's 80, then I want full range of motion until then. I don't want a hip replacement, and I don't have to have one. It's just how you, like, again, awareness of saying, okay, how am I sitting? Which right now I'm sitting horribly, but like, all right, how can I modify little things in my day-to-day life? So brain was, going back to that. Great. So lion's mane and omega-3, just make sure that it's a good one. Again, that book is a great one. Cold showers or jumping into cold water. Anything with cold water is great. For me, it started because, again, with the concussion, it made perfect sense, because when you bruise yourself, you put ice on it. All right, so my brain got bruised. Let's put some cold water on it. And that's what people do when, say, somebody comes into A&E with a brain injury. They put it on ice. So if you just extend that whole entire metaphor to your body and inflammation of the body, taking cold showers. So for me, I was one of those people that took scalding hot showers and my skin was pink and it was like, oh, this is my 10 minutes of joy. And I started shifting away from it. So I would do, you know, a full hot shower, and then at the very end, I would say, okay, 30 seconds of cold, or I would start out with 10 seconds, and then every day add on 10, 15 seconds. So I took it also as a time that I would just swear. So like, honestly, I would just stand in the shower and be like, I'm going to come up with every single swear that I possibly can, or just like get out any anger, or like, so it was a double whammy, right? So like that cold shower. Primal scream situation. Yeah, it was a primal scream, exactly. So it's like, I'm so nervous about this podcast or whatever it is, or like just get it all out during those cold moments.
And that serves a double purpose as well, because it's not useful to be in the cold shower standing with tension.
No, I'm glad you brought that up.
You need to be relaxed.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to do that if you don't have like a regular breath practice or something where you're used to sitting in discomfort and understanding how your body responds to challenge. So something like that, where you're going, okay, I recognize the challenge, I'm just going to let that challenge out. It's naturally going to translate into your body movements and into your muscles.
And for me, because I do it in the morning, it's such a psychological shift. Because if I can get through a 10-minute cold shower, I can get through anything in that day. Like I've already conquered. Frankly, the rest of the day is just is a bonus, you know, because I've already conquered a big fear. I've conquered something. I mean, it still sucks. I've been doing it for a year and it's still horrible. But after you get out of it, you're like, yes, I'm victorious. Like I am such a queen that I can just take on anything, you know. And then you don't really need a cup of coffee. I still do it because I love coffee, and then I add the lion's mane or whatever. So brain stuff we covered, cold showers. So light is so huge for me. And I mean it from a couple of things. One is staring in the sun in the morning. If you have that as an opportunity, and
sun gazing,
exactly.
So there's loads of stuff online about
there is, be careful, obviously. Do it only in the first hour of the sunrise, because just be careful. Read about it, be careful, or message me and then I can tell you more about it. And the other thing with light is non-natural light, right? So all of this stuff, for me, it's been huge because I was so light sensitive immediately after the concussion. So I got into blue light blocking. So blue light, there's a lot of articles online on it as well. In a nutshell, it affects not only our circadian rhythms and melatonin levels, but numerous other things in our bodies. There's a guy by the name of Jack Cruz. He is fantastic to listen to. I would highly recommend listening to his podcasts and not his blog itself, because the blog gets really technical and it's just tough. So if you have time to listen to something on the way to work or something, then his YouTube videos are great. So just Google like Jack Cruz on any YouTube and you'll find loads of them. But he's a big proponent of yielding or shielding yourself from blue light.
And actually moved on. He's totally moved on from like the macronutrient thing. Thing. He's like, we are electrochemical beings, and what we need to look at is like the electrical quality of what we're putting into our bodies, which is amazing. I mean, he made one comment about local food, and like food that's grown at the same latitude as where you are operates at the same vibration as you do. Yes. And so when you put it in, your mitochondria go, I understand this. Whereas if you're getting like a burger that's got ingredients from 20 different places all around the world, your body just literally doesn't understand it. It makes so much sense. It really does. And he's not woo. He's a neuroscientist as well, right? Yeah, he's a neurosurgeon. So on the day in, day out, he operates on people's brains. He literally operates on people's brains. And then he himself had his own health journey where he basically got himself down like 70 pounds or something like that just by cold showers, getting away from any of the blue light, eating a lot of seafood, and what else? Those are like the big ones. Blue light. There's a company called Raw Optics, which I really like. I have one here. These are the ones I use. If anybody wants to see. These are them, and then there's these ones as well. I'll hold them up the camera for a second.
Support.
Thank you. Are they very expensive? Should we be very careful?
No, that's fine.
There you go. Those are evening ones, the rosy tinted chaps.
So the red ones I put on at 7 o'clock at night. If I put these on at 7, then by 10 p.m. I'm comatose. So basically, in a nutshell, what it means is you put these on, it blocks the blue light from all these lights coming around. Blue light is a thing that tells your body not to create melatonin. Melatonin is the thing that tells you to go to sleep. So if you're looking at this right before you go to sleep, your body still thinks that it's solar noon, that it's 12 p.m. Instead of 11 p.m., right? So your body, you're falling asleep because you've been up for the entire day.
But hormonally,
and your mitochondria are like, what's going on? It's still solar noon. I should have cortisol. I should be waking up. Like, let's go. So if I put those glasses on at 7, then it gives my brain and my body time to just wind down and calm down. And the other thing is at night also, because the skin is your biggest organ, you need to be thinking about how that light is impacting your skin, right?
My son's here today
with us. You might come along.
He's off camera, but he's very special.
Very present.
So the light that's coming from there, it's hitting your skin, and your skin's your biggest organ. So if that's the case, then you're again giving your body the wrong signal. So at nighttime, I will definitely cover up all my skin as much as possible. Like, this is perfect. And also covering up your thyroid.
There's like intranasal and intraoral light receptors. Like a lot of our photoreceptors actually are in our nose and in our ears. I'd love to know the history.
Who would ever know that?
It's amazing.
But so your thyroid is something to also think about, especially with women. When we're sitting in front of a computer, right? If you have the laptop right there. Guys, you still have what is it called, a tie, or you guys will button up. Women, most of this is really open.
Interesting.
So for me, most of the time I'll put a scarf around it, because at least that is covering from the laptop all that blue light coming straight to my thyroid and messing up all my hormones.
Wow.
Such a simple hack. Throw a scarf on, especially in the winter time, and you're done.
Cool.
What else? Wi-Fi at night. Turn that thing off, and anything electromagnetic. I mean, my phone is all the way on the other side over there. It's usually not in my room. It's usually, if it's on me, it's on airplane mode. And just again, how you turn off airplane mode, be aware that it's not just from the bottom. You actually have to go into the settings and turn it off.
Does it not work when you just tap it and swipe it from the bottom?
No. So you have to go into the settings. But like EMF, this could be another hour conversation just on electromagnetic fields, non-native electromagnetic fields. But in a nutshell, I run the Boston Biohacking meetup, and we had a specialist come in who she brought to the Supreme Court in Israel a case saying that Wi-Fi in kids' schools is completely detrimental to their health, and she won it. You cannot win a case in the Supreme Court without proper scientific evidence. You just can't. So that being said, Wi-Fi, children, all of us. I mean, kids as well, because there's more water weight with them. But turning off the Wi-Fi at night. You don't need it. You're going to sleep. Like, why do you need that to be buzzing through your house or through your head?
The Lion King says no.
Lion King says no. So no Wi-Fi. I think that's 4 hacks, and I think we're good to go. I think we're good. Yeah. Sorry guys, I can talk for ages.
Don't apologize. Lovely to talk to you. I'm so glad we did this.
Yeah,
likewise. Opportunity. And you guys, please. Thank you much for watching. Please like and subscribe as usual to our channel. Check us out on social media. We're now on Facebook and Twitter as well as Instagram. We finally did that thing. You also check us out on Patreon, where you can help us support the stuff that we're doing, and you'll get some great kind of extra insights with us and with our guests. If you choose to support us there. What else? Look out for we're going to post a video out this about our newsletter sponsorship, and
newsletter is amazing.
There you go.
Absolutely incredible. Yeah, use it for sure.
Hey, nice, lovely. Thank you for that. Every little helps. That's really it. And Dasha, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Yeah, likewise.
And your brief trip to Dublin. I hope we get to see you again.
Yeah, and then if anybody is going to be in London in end of August time frame, watch out, there might be a health optimization summit coming your way, so keep up to date. My Instagram is _dash_of_health. So you guys will post it, I'm sure.
Totally post it.
So that's August 2019.
August, September. We're trying to figure out the dates, but it's gonna be one that you're definitely gonna want to come to.
Yeah,
it'll be good. So hush for now,
indeed.
but
I didn't say them.
but it's
listen to our podcast.
You'll find
follow
out
our
more.
Instagram, follow hers. You'll find out.
Yeah.
Okay, Debbie, thanks again, guys.
Thanks,
Cheers.
guys.
Bye.